I was joking earlier, but Jupiter retrograde does feel like a hangover. You see, we're faced with the consequences of avoiding inconvenient truths, including climate change. This is Saturn, girl, and it's time to tighten our belts. Why? Because on October 9th, Jupiter, our fabulous father of fortune, is stationing retrograde in Gemini and won't go direct again until February of 2025. Between now and then, Jupy Jupe is going on a little diet. Our bloaty brother is full of hot air, and he needs to pass some gas, if you feel me. But let's look at the fun chart, shall we? Here's Jupiter. Look at him. He's slowing down. Yo, Jupe, why you moving so slow? You're not hungover again, are you? And boom! Jupiter is now retrograde. This is a big deal, my love. So we're going to talk about what this Jupiter retrograde means, and more importantly, what it means for you by doing your horoscopes for the occasion in the second half of this video. So you better watch this shit till the end. Say, what does retrograde mean anyway? Well, retrograde motion is when a planet appears to move backwards through the zodiac as seen from Earth. We know that planets don't actually move backwards. They all orbit the sun in the same direction, but at different speeds. You see, Jupiter's what we call a superior planet. And yeah, we all know those Jupiterian types feel very superior. Especially those naughty Sagittarians, huh? But seriously, that means Jupiter's farther from the sun than the Earth, and therefore moves much slower. When the Earth approaches within about 60 degrees or so of a superior planet, that planet appears to slow down, stop, and move backwards. Of course, retrograde motion has a special significance in astrology. Like I just said, a planet appears to slow down, stop, and move backwards. Therefore, it's quite fitting that retrograde motion typically indicates three primary things. Number one, delays, which means things are slower coming to fruition. Number two, reversals. If a situation is good, it'll probably get worse. If a situation is bad, it'll probably get better. You see, retrogrades take the usual significations of a planet and turn them on their heads. Retrogrades also often indicate having to go back and revisit a situation that was either left undone or needs to be redone. You see, Jupiter is the planet of philosophy, religion, wisdom, and abundance. However, he also rules fanaticism, arrogance, condescension, and self-indulgence. Moreover, Jupiter also rules expansion, so he kind of blows things up or makes them bigger. And he's full of hot air, which means he can get pretty preachy too. Now, Jupiter goes retrograde about every 13 months for about 4 months at a time. And the key phrase I thought about for this transit, as I said earlier, is tightening our belts. If Jupiter rules expansion, then Jupiter retrograde would mean what? Contraction. It forces us to face misplaced optimism, wasteful spending, squandering our resources, and fear of scarcity. Sometimes we actually do try to slim down and perhaps start a diet of our own. I know I did. In fact, many people will be making New Year's resolutions while Jupiter's retrograde. However, they'll probably only last a month till Jupiter goes direct again in February. It's kind of funny that when Jupiter went retrograde in 2023, Novo Nordisk, the Danish manufacturer of the weight loss drug Wegovy, became the most valuable company in Europe. That's making money from shrinking tummies. We also feel a need for frugality. I know I've been feeling this. Please help me. Consider becoming a member of my channel or tipping me or just subscribing. I need all the help I can get. Anyway, we have another example of this from when Jupiter went retrograde in 2022. That's when Senate Democrats passed the Inflation Reduction Act, which was relatively successful at deflating some high prices. And that word deflate is very Jupiter retrograde. We also see delayed justice for past crimes and scandals. For example, last September 2023, the British news outlets The Times and Channel 4 released some disturbing allegations about comedian Russell Brand, which included rape, sexual assault, manipulation, and abuse. Then around the same time, Donald John Trump was convicted of fraud in the state of New York after inflating his asset values. Wait a second, inflate? That's a very Jupiter word. Then Jupiter retrograde shrunk it all. All these contractions. Jupiter's having so many contractions, it's like he's in labor. Plus, Trump's former lawyer, Jenna Ellis, pled guilty in the Georgia election interference case. You know, the one where Trump basically told his people, find me 11,000 votes. I do a terrible Trump impression. I must be the only one. Also, President Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, was brought up on gun charges. And then Danny Masterson, the star of the hit TV sitcom That 70s Show, was sentenced to 30 years in prison after his conviction for 2 counts of rape. On the contraction front, around that same time, the Japanese government released a report that about 30% of its population was over 65. That's literally a shrinking population. This time around, though, I think we're going to see more disputes in Congress over budget cuts, decreased consumer and government spending, more efforts to curb inflation, and growing calls to address climate change stemming from all the hurricanes we've been having. Jupiter retrograde can bring loss of property and money, so I'm concerned about the devastation from this hurricane. It will be very, very expensive. In the United States birth chart, Jupiter rules both the first house of self and body, as well as the fourth house of homeland. And Saturn has been square Jupiter, bringing injuries and washing away homes. You see, Saturn rules death and tragedies by water. Jupiter is also transiting the United States 7th house of oppositions. And he's been going around spreading his hot air, which by that I just mean blatant lies and exaggerations. And these further sow discord in an already divided population. As for us, though, we'll be experiencing contraction in our lives based on which houses in your chart that Jupiter rules. We've likely been overly optimistic about that area of life, or not even paying attention to it. And now we gotta figure our shit out and organize our lives. We often find that we need to cut our spending and consolidate our resources. I was joking earlier, but Jupiter retrograde does feel like a hangover. You see, we're faced with the consequences of avoiding inconvenient truths, including climate change. On top of that, though, Saturn will be making a square to Jupiter on and off between now and next spring. So these issues will seem to just drag on. But to see how this will affect you personally, we need to do your horoscopes for the occasion. So remember, we do these for each rising sign because that's what determines your houses. But if you don't know it, just watch for your sun sign, okay? So let's start off with Aries Rising, our Aries Rising Hermes. This means Jupiter's been transiting your 3rd house of communication and extended family. He also rules your 9th house of beliefs and your 12th house of mental health and isolation. You've likely been producing a torrent of content, like writing and speaking projects. Or you could have been having progress with your education. Jupiter retrograde, though, will likely slow that progress down. Maybe it's because you have to readdress a mental or physical health issue. Be ready to make some doctor's appointments, okay? Alternatively, though, it could be that a family member has health issues, depression, or becomes estranged from you. Since Gemini is your 3rd house of extended family, right? You may also have to cancel a trip, or at least wait till next year to take it. There may also be a legal issue that you have to address that you thought was done, but now you have to revisit it. Or, once again, it may be a family member who needs your help through these similar issues. But let's move on to Taurus, our Taurus Rising Hermes. So for Taurus, Jupiter has been transiting your second house of money and your stuff. He also rules your 8th house of death and debt and your 11th house of hopes and friends. You've likely been reorganizing your finances, starting a new job or a business, or perhaps you've been paying down your own debt. Jupiter retrograde, though, will likely depress your finances. You probably will have debts or expenses that you weren't aware of. Now, they're likely blowing up in your face. Alternatively, though, you could also get an offer of money, a gift, or a small inheritance. Any payments you get, though, will be delayed. It could also be that you have to borrow money, which happens when payments are delayed, or perhaps a friend asks you for money. Either way, you'll start feeling more relief in February. Okay? But let's move on to Gemini Rising. Our Gemini Rising Hermes. Oops. I've been going by day. I meant to go by hour. Hours. There we go. Gemini Rising. So Jupiter's been transiting your first house of self, mind, body, and spirit. He also rules your 7th house of partnerships and oppositions, and your 10th house of life direction. I bet you've been feeling more confident, maybe optimistic, perhaps a little indulgent. We often gain a little weight under this transit. Maybe you've been working on changing careers or jobs at the same time. Jupiter retrograde, though, may indicate that you want to work on your health or your appearance, or readdress a change that you've already made in one of those areas. Perhaps you need to get back on the exercise wagon. If you have been working on a career change, though, you may be getting frustrated. Like, you can't catch a break. This will ease up in February, but since the 7th house is involved, it could be a spouse or partner that's having these issues, and will need your support. But let's move on to Cancer Rising, our Cancer Rising Hermes. So this means Jupiter is transiting your 12th house of mental health and isolation. He also rules your 6th house of injuries, work, and pets, and your 9th house of beliefs. So you've likely been stuck in healing mode, or taking more time out of the busyness to reflect, hopefully, and process big changes that you've gone through. Maybe your beliefs are causing you trouble. Jupiter retrograde, though, could indicate needing to find a therapist or exposing someone who may be manipulating you or talking shit behind your back, probably at work. A pet may get sick as well. It's also likely that you're investigating the past in some way or rekindling beliefs or practices that you left behind. But let's move on to Leo Rising, our Leo Rising Hermes. So, this means Jupiter's been transiting your 11th house of hopes and friends. He also rules your 5th house of pleasure and kids, as well as your 8th house of death and debt. I bet you've been feeling more supported and optimistic lately, haven't you? Maybe you've been more social, getting out and meeting new people. However, the money situation has probably been difficult. Jupiter retrograde could represent someone close to you passing away, unfortunately, but that's the worst permutation, so don't trip on that. And perhaps you get a small inheritance between now and next spring. It could also mean shrinking debt or consolidating your resources somehow. If you have children, they could have issues with school, or perhaps you just get sick of being a chauffeur. There may be something your children left undone that bites you in the butt. Making time for fun and enjoyment, though, is very important here for my dear Leo Rising. But let's move on here to Virgo Rising, our Virgo Rising Hermes. This means Jupiter's been transiting your 10th house of career and life direction. He also rules your 4th house of home and private life, as well as your 7th house of marriages and partnerships. You've probably been experiencing some luck at work, or been getting a good reputation. Sometimes we get a mentor, start a new job, or have more harmonious relationships at work or with our bosses. Authority figures in general, you see. Jupiter retrograde, though, will likely make you have to finish or redo a project. Maybe you applied for a job and you haven't heard back in a while. You may finally get to work from home. That's always cool. Very lucky. It's also likely that you've been competing with someone for a job or developed a rivalry. Alternatively, though, it could be that a spouse or partner is going through the job hunt, which could be exacerbating rifts in your relationship. So take care to communicate and discuss these things as they come up with your partner. But let's move on to Libra Rising. Our Libra Rising Hermes. This means Jupiter has been transiting your ninth house of beliefs and rules both your third house of siblings and extended family, as well as your sixth house of health, work, and pets. You've probably been dealing with educational stuff or preparing to take a trip. Sometimes we explore new belief systems and spiritual paths, or a legal situation could be improving. Jupiter retrograde, though, will bring frustration in these areas, like delaying a trip or backtracking with a legal situation. You may also find renewed interest in beliefs you left behind. Positively, though, it could be that you reconnect with a family member. Perhaps they moved far away, or you just haven't been able to talk for a while. A sibling may have health issues that need your help. But let's move on here to Scorpio Rising. Our Scorpio Rising Hermes. So for Scorpio Rising, Jupiter's been touring your 8th house of death and debt. He also rules your 2nd house of finances and your 5th house of children and pleasure. This is a transit where we often get relief from debt. Maybe we get a gift or an inheritance. And we usually take stock of our resources and make adjustments. This Jupiter retrograde, though, is literally about reining in your expenses. This could mean debt consolidation, as I've talked about with other 2nd and 8th house placements. Or it could mean mitigating a loss. I bet you've been bleeding money now and it's starting to weigh on you. So get that gauze and stop the bleeding. It could also be that your kids are costing you more money as well. Or perhaps they're facing their own struggles. Maybe even with money. Either way, though, relief comes from being more realistic about your money and planning accordingly. But let's move on to Snagimattarius Rising. Our Snagimattarius Rising Hermes. This means Jupiter's touring your 7th house of partnerships and oppositions. He also rules your 1st house of self and body, as well as your 4th house of home and private life. I sure hope you've been having luck in your relationships. Sometimes we meet someone new, or experience about a year or so of renewed enjoyment with our partners. Jupiter retrograde, though, is likely bringing a few months of struggle. It may feel like you don't get to see each other or your partner as much as you'd like. And it may feel like there's an infidelity situation or something from the private life gets exposed. Really, it could be any sort of exposure of you or your partner's private life. Alternatively, though, you could lose a contest or a competition of some sort. So if you do lose, don't lose the lesson. But let's move on to Capricorn Rising, our Cappy Rising Hermes. So Jupiter's been transiting your 6th house of health, work, and pets. He also rules your 3rd house of communication and extended family, as well as your 12th house of isolation and mental health. That means you've probably been trying to get your health in order, which usually means starting a new exercise routine, nutrition regimen, or getting more sleep. Jupiter retrograde, though, most likely will bring setbacks in these endeavors. Maybe you gain back some weight, and it feels like you're sliding backwards. Be careful about getting depressed, right, during this time, because it'll be very easy to. And I tell you, don't give up. But it could also be that another family member is having health issues, and you need to support them in some way. But let's move on to Aqua Rising. Our Aqua Rising Hermes. This is me! Yay! Jupiter's been transiting our fifth house of children and pleasure. And he rules our second house of money and our 11th house of hopes and friends. So I bet you've been enjoying yourself, haven't you? I know I have been, It could be going out to eat, spending too much money, or if you're like me, dating a lot, if you know what I mean. It could also mean that you've been having better relationships with your children. I know in my case, it's definitely felt wonderful. However, you've also been stressed about money, and Jupiter retrograde could make your children more expensive. Maybe it's sixth grade camp or something like that. This should be a time to reduce expenses and find what guilty or not so guilty pleasures you can do without. This should be a time for you and for me to get our finances in order, right? I'm dealing with this too. We also can reconnect with friends we haven't spoken to much. That also happened to me. That was very interesting. Anyway, let's move on to Pisces Rising. Our Pisces Rising friends. So for Pisces Rising, Jupiter's been transiting your fourth house of home, private life, and parents. He also rules your first house of self and body. Anyway, as well as your 10th house of life, direction, and career. This has been a bit of a wild time for you, hasn't it? Maybe you've been dealing with chronic pain or health issues. You could also be getting help from your parents, whether they're still alive or not. Sometimes that comes with a little bit of money, Perhaps you're getting some luck with the home search. Or, like I said with another placement, you get a job working from home. In fact, Jupiter retrograde could likely bring that on. If you've been struggling with work-life balance, this is the time to address it. Now, we don't have a lot of control over that, but we can at least try our best to enjoy our private time. It often feels like work invades our space, but you can't let it. You're also having a big upheaval in your identity, and your confidence will likely be feeling a bit shaky. This is not a time for action. It's a time for reflection, to consider yourself, your feelings, and how you're doing. But anyway, I hope all that is useful stuff, and I hope that it can be practical information for you. And be sure to come visit my live streams. I give more detailed live readings, and you'll definitely get a lot out of that. So please support me and join us. Thank you for watching. Like this video and subscribe to my channel. And make sure to click the bell when you subscribe so that you get notified when my new videos drop. And I do the best readings. It's science. You can book through my website, saturngirl.org. And if you can't afford a reading right now, come to my live streams and get one for free. But you have to be subscribed to get notified about them. And please consider tipping me. It helps me make such wonderful content. You can give through super thanks below or become a member of my channel. And remember, I love you. You're beautiful. And have a wonderful, whatever it is you're having.